Hey guys, welcome to Redneck Off the Range, and all those projects that I showed you a few episodes ago, they're starting to take place here at the farm. The newest one being, we cut the big tree down. As you can see, I'm standing on the stump of the tree, and if you don't remember that episode, I showed a very large, after we cut it down, we measured it at about 70 foot. But there was a 70-ish foot tree here, and it was dead, and it was just a falling hazard. It could fall on the barn, it could fall on the house, on the electrical line. And for many years, it's really had to come down, and we finally decided to cut it down. We came out here with some ropes and some chainsaws, tied the ropes to the tree into the back of the truck, and just cut the tree down, right down the hill there. As you can see, you can probably see some remnants of the tree still back there because they're really big, and we had to pick them up by hand because we don't have a tractor with a loader or anything like that out here right now. So it kind of sucked. So that's one project that we've had to do for a really long time, and we actually have a few other trees that we need to cut down too, but this was the most important one, I think. And the problem with that is there's so many trees that have either been cut down or just fell, just died and fell over the years. We're starting to run out of shade trees out here. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of shade trees left. And let me just show you that. So obviously there's the tree we just cut down. This tree here is the next tree that has to come down because obviously it's leaning towards the barn, and that's not good. So many years ago, there used to be a tree here where somebody carved my grandparents' names into the stump. There used to be a tree there, and there used to be a tree somewhere over here a long, long time ago. There used to be a tree there. There used to be a third tree down there by the dock. And there used to be a tree right there. So we're running out of shade trees here at the farm, and we're gonna have to eventually find some way to get shade out here. So let me show you what my solution is. So as you can see here, I'm watering these two little oak trees. Not really sure what kind of oak trees these are, but my grandfather actually planted these trees many years ago as just little saplings, just little bitty tiny trees, and he actually had some tips of fishing poles in the ground right next to them so that you knew not to run over them with the lawnmower. And they're still growing. Amazingly, the deer haven't tore them up or anything like some other trees we've actually paid to have out here. We bought I don't know, 3 trees several years back from Lowe's or Home Depot or something, and the deer just tore those things up. These, I'm not sure where my grandfather got these. He probably just found them in the yard somewhere and dug them up and planted them here. And I don't know how many years ago that was, but I don't know, probably 10, 12 years. And it took them a long time to actually get big, but now, as you can see, I mean, they're probably about 8 foot tall. And I just, anytime I'm out here, if it's not raining, I'll water them. And of course, late at night like this, you don't want to water early in the day. Let me rephrase. You can either water early in the day before the sun gets high in the sky, or you can water later in the evening like I usually do. Because you want to water them when it's not super hot out. You don't want to water them like at noon or 2 o'clock or something. You want to water them when it's cool. And so I'll do that anytime I come out here. I'll water these trees and several other trees that I'll show you in a bit. But all the trees we have out here right now that I'm trying to water and get to grow, we didn't pay for any of them. The only 2 that were, I don't really know where these ones came from, if they came from here, if they came from my grandfather's house, but either way, nobody paid for these trees. These were all free trees, and they're still going strong. So I'll show you that in a little bit. So next we have these 2 little maple trees. These are trees that we actually took out of one of the fields where all the tall grass is, and where all the persimmon trees were starting to grow. and we found there's actually several maple trees in there too. And my mom actually dug out this tree and that tree over there. I think you can see it in the frame. But she dug out these two trees and planted them here a couple of years ago. And when they first were planted, they were only about this tall. And now I'd say they're probably about, this one's probably 7 foot tall. And that one's probably, I don't know, 6.5, maybe 7 foot tall. These ones are a little questionable on whether they're going to make it. As you can see, there's lots of leaves up top, but there's not a whole lot of leaves on the bottom. We do need to cut a few of these lower branches off because when you're trying to grow trees, baby trees like to grow branches down low, and you want to make sure that you cut those off at certain points, and that way the tree uses its energy to grow up and not just grow branches down low and trying to grow those leaves down low. It gives it a chance to grow up, and eventually up here it should branch off more. We actually have a couple of maple trees. See if I can get over. Anyway, what I was trying to say is we actually have a maple tree at my house that was bought, I don't know, probably 12-ish years ago. And when we first bought it, it was like the size of this tree here, maybe a little bit bigger. It was one of those you get from Lowe's, and it was on clearance for like, I don't know if it was $5 or $15, but it was a pretty cheap tree. And over the years, you know, we have a sprinkler system at home, so every other day it was getting watered. So it was getting watered pretty regularly, and I had to cut all the lower branches off so that I could get under it with the lawnmower. And now I'd say that tree is a good 25 to 30 foot tall and probably a good 8 or 9 inches around. And you know, that's pretty good for what, 12, I don't think it's been 13 years yet, so I'd say maximum 12 years we've had that tree. And it started out probably about this size, maybe a little bit bigger. And hopefully, if we can keep these watered and cut off some of these low branches so that they can grow up and branch out more, hopefully in 5, 6, 7 years they'll start to look like that tree that we have at home. And hopefully the deer don't tear them up. We're probably going to have to get some fencing to put around some of these trees because deer like to come in and tear things up, especially in the fall and the winter when they have antlers, and they like to come in and they like to rub their antlers on the trees and break limbs and rub the bark off. So we're probably gonna have to do that at least on these 2 trees and probably several other trees. I'll show you another one that we're definitely gonna have to do that in the future, so stick around. All right, now we've made it to the persimmon trees, at least what I was always told were persimmon trees. These trees started popping up all over the fields several years back whenever we stopped brush hogging them because the tractor wasn't working at the time, and it still hasn't worked in the last like 10 years. But these trees just started popping up all over the fields, and we've gone through and we've cut many of them out, but there's still a lot of them in the fields because we really haven't been able to brush hog in the last 10 years or so. And we eventually just decided to keep several of them, and this is one of them. This is one that's at the corner of the house, and it's probably been here since the beginning, since they started popping up. So it's probably like 10 years old, maybe 8 or 9, something like that. I don't really have a specific date where I know that we saw them popping up, but this one's definitely one of the older ones, and it's right by the house. And all these trees I've showed you so far are right by the house. So the idea is if I can get these trees watered good, they'll grow. I've read online that if you keep persimmon trees, if you keep the soil around the persimmon trees good and wet, they can grow up to 2 feet a year. And this one right now is probably about 8 foot. It's probably about the same size as those oak trees, which those oak trees are definitely older than this tree. So this one is growing pretty good, and all the rest of them are growing pretty good. In fact, this one's a shorter one compared to the other ones that I'll show you in a few minutes. But this one, I'm definitely trying to get good and tall because it's right by the house, and it's right by where we plan to put a parking space. We plan to put a parking space right here. So hopefully, if I can get this good and watered and the deer don't tear it up, I can get it to be a nice shade tree for the vehicles that we're going to park here. The problem with this tree is that some kind of bugs like to eat the leaves, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's a lot of these leaves are eaten away pretty good. Not anywhere compared to some trees that we've had at home with Japanese beetles and stuff like that. But it's definitely taken a beating this year. But the leaves are all still green. Some of them were yellow at one point in time, but I started watering it really good, and I don't see too many yellow leaves on this tree anymore. And a lot of the other persimmon trees that we have elsewhere on the property, I've been watering them too, and a lot of them have yellow leaves on them as well. So I'm trying to get them watered as good as I can. I'm not gonna water as thoroughly as I usually do because I think it's supposed to rain tonight, either late tonight or early tomorrow morning. But all the ones around the house I want to get good and watered, and hopefully it's gonna rain and they'll get more water, and that will be good for them for the next week or so. So anyway, this is the first persimmon tree that I'm going to show you. There's lots of persimmon trees out here, but this is just the first one, and really there's only 2 of them that I can actually water with the hose. Pretty much all the other trees that I water, I have to water with a bucket, which is not fun, but that's just kind of how I got to do it if I want to keep them watered. So I'll show you those here in a bit. Right, this is the last tree I can actually get with the hose, because all the other trees are further away, but this is just another persimmon tree, and I actually decided just recently that I was going to start watering this tree because it's the biggest tree on the other side of the house, right by the door, well, across the driveway from the door, and it's the biggest one. It's right on the edge of the field, and I just decided that, this might be a good tree to try to get to grow. As you can see, there's quite a few other trees and weeds around it. I got trees over there, tall grass, all kinds of things that need to be cut down and brush hogged out of here, so that this can actually stop competing for sun and for water. But until then, I'm just going to continue watering it. And again, it's just another persimmon tree like a lot of the other ones out here. And as you can see, with most of the trees that I'm watering, I'm trying to go up and hit the leaves and simulate rain. I don't really know why. I don't necessarily know that that's a recommended way to water, but my philosophy on this is if you water up and you let the water drip off the leaves, the water is going to naturally fall and simulate rain, so that the water theoretically should naturally go where the tree wants to drink from. A lot of people, they'll just take a hose and they'll put it right at the base of the tree. Well, the tree, the roots go out, and the roots might go to here, and so if you water and simulate rain, then the water is just naturally going to go where the roots are, in a heavier volume, at least on this nozzle, than I would just doing this. And I can get the other side of the tree too if I can just go up and it'll drip off the leaves on the back side, as opposed to me going around into this tall grass. Not necessarily saying that's the right way to do it. It may very well be the wrong way to do it, but that's just the way I do it. Some of the smaller trees I can't really do that because I don't really have any branches on the bottom. They just have a few branches on the top, like those little maple trees. But let's see, this is the 6th tree that I've been watering today, and the last tree that I'm going to water today, just because it's getting late and it's supposed to rain tonight. So, but I will show you all the other trees that I have been watering out here, and show you what I hope happens in the future. All right, so now we're on the other side of the yard from where the house is, and as you can see over here, we have another persimmon tree that is planted right at the corner of this tall field of grass right here. The grass comes around, and this, a long time ago, actually was a place to tee off for a mini round of golf. Not mini golf, but there is actually a golf hole up there, and this was just a place to tee off at. But anyway, in this tall grass, we have lots and lots of trees, mostly persimmon trees. As you can see here, one tree that we found, I guess it was last year when we were cutting out, there used to be a whole bunch of trees right here, bigger trees, like trees the size of this one. This is a maple tree, and it is probably about 10 foot tall at this point. And we decided this was a tree that we were going to keep. As you can see here, lots of little saplings, little persimmon tree saplings have started to come back up. But this is a maple tree, and as you can see here, the deer have torn this one up a bit last year. So this year I'm gonna get some orange fencing and put it around this tree when we get a little closer to fall. But anyway, so far this tree here and that persimmon tree right there are the only two we've decided to keep on this side of the yard. As you can see here, there's a miniature forest of trees, mostly persimmon trees, but there's also quite a few maple trees in here. And if we can find another good one like that, we might keep another one over here. So hopefully we'll have at least 2 good maple trees that we can water and get to be pretty decent size. Like I said, that one's probably about 10 foot tall right now, so hopefully in a few more years, as long as the deer don't tear it up, it'll start to take shape and be a decent shade tree. And like I said, I can't water these ones with the hose, so I just take a 5-gallon bucket, I fill it up with the hose, and I drive it over here with the golf cart, and I just dump 5 gallons on it, and a couple, 2 or 3 times. So it gets probably 10 or so gallons of water on each of these trees and the next set of trees that I'm going to show you. This little bitty bush right here is a bald cypress tree, and believe it or not, it is actually the oldest of all these trees that I've shown you and all the trees that I'm going to show you. This tree I planted out here, there's actually 3 of them. I planted out here probably 15, 16 years ago when I was a Weeblo scout. So I was in 5th grade or 4th or 5th grade. And believe it or not, it was actually taller than this. And like I said, there were 3 of them. It started out as a stick. Well, maybe it was about this tall. But it started out as just a stick. And there were 3 sticks, and the birds just kept landing on them and breaking them in half. And the other 2 died because reasons, birds and deer and stuff. This is the only surviving one. In fact, this is the only surviving one out of the 20 or so that there were. Not all of them came out here. Some of them were planted elsewhere. All the other ones died, but this one. And over the years, it has branched off. Like I said, the birds, that landed on it broke it off, and there's actually a little stump in there. This is actually not the original top of the tree. This is a branch. So it's kind of cool how it actually saved itself. And I don't actually water this one. I just let it go. And it's so close to the lake, and it loves it down here. I mean, when the lake gets over full and the water actually comes up to it, it just loves it and it thrives off of it. So I don't water this one, and honestly, I don't ever see this one being a shade tree. It is such a slow grower. Like I said, it should be taller, but it's not. And that's just the way it is. But over here, we have 3 more persimmon trees. And this one over here is looking a little sickly, but generally I will just take a 5-gallon bucket, I'll go down to the water, I'll fill it up as much as I can, and I'll come up here and I'll just dump it one at a time, 3-4 buckets worth, which are actually a third of a bucket. but I'll just pour buckets on these 3 trees until I feel like they've had enough water, or until I get tired. That one's not doing too bad. This one, these other 2 are a little smaller. They haven't branched out quite as much. And I mean, that's okay. There's so many persimmon trees out here that if one dies, there's like 10 more that take its place. I mean, these things spread like wildfire. But I'm hoping that I can at least save the majority of the ones that I'm wanting to keep. As you can see here, something is eating these leaves. I forget what those bugs are called that, you know, come and eat leaves. I know Japanese beetles like it, but I'm not sure if Japanese beetles like persimmon trees or not. But I mean, there's still life in these branches. Some of the branches die. That's just kind of the way it is. The ones that die, I just break off, like this one here. Still life in that one. It's just missing leaves. So hopefully these 3 can survive the winter and go into the next season. This little cluster of 4 trees here, I really don't water these. Whenever it rains, the rain naturally comes down this little gully right here where all of these trees are planted, and it keeps them nice and watered. And there's just a natural spring that runs through here, especially in times of heavy rain. And so, generally speaking, these 4 trees thrive. I mean, it looks like there's only 3, but there's actually 2 side by side right there. And really the only reason we keep these is so that we have some good deep roots in the ground to keep the ground together so that it doesn't erode away in times of heavy rain. Many years ago, we didn't cut this. This was all tall grass right here, and eventually we decided to cut it, and it's such a swamp over here that we wanted to keep a few trees in this little gully to keep the ground together. But if you look up here, there's another cluster of 4 trees, and these trees, they're probably at least 10 foot tall, especially, you know, that one and that one over there. This is the shortest one, but, you know, they're probably about 10 feet tall, maybe, possibly even 12 feet tall. I don't have a tape measure, and I'm bad at guessing height, but I'd say at least 10 to 12 feet tall on these 4 trees. And, you know, many years ago, before we just had the 4 trees, there was actually a huge cluster of trees right here that we had to cut around, you know, cut the grass around. And I one day decided I was gonna come up here and cut all these trees out except for a few, and I probably took out 3 to 4 dozen trees out of here. That's how many trees were over here. But I do like having these 4 trees, and maybe eventually we'll cut 1 or 2 of them down just because they're so close together. But I mean, over there, you know, those trees, those are persimmon trees, and several of those are really close together. So, you know, maybe they'll survive like this. But, you know, once you took out all the smaller trees, all these trees stopped having to compete for the sunlight and for the rain. So they started to thrive once you took all those trees out. And again, I'll get buckets of water, and I'll drive up here, and I'll just pour a few buckets, 2, 3, maybe 4 buckets on each tree, depending on how much time I have. And they are starting to get pretty tall, and I'm pretty happy with them. All right, we're at the top of the field now, where the golf green actually is. Golf green's right there. We're at the top of the field, and on the edge of the tall grass, there's quite a few more of these bigger, 10-foot trees. This one's pretty decent size. There's several pretty decent sized ones. So whenever we decide we're gonna come through here and cut all this out, I'll probably keep 1 or 2 trees. Like, this one's probably a pretty decent one. I'll probably just keep ones on the edge. All the ones in the middle can probably go, especially, all these cedar trees. I might keep 1 cedar tree, I don't know. I kind of like cedar trees. Dad doesn't really like them, so we'll see. But some of these trees that are on the edge, like all these persimmon trees, I might keep 1, maybe 2 of them as, we go down the hill. I haven't decided to water any of them and single any of them out, but once we start cutting it all down, then I'll make my decision on which trees stay and which trees go. And then hopefully they'll start to thrive a little bit better once I start watering them and they stop competing for the sunlight. Like, this tree here, this is a pretty decent cedar tree. That one might be worth saving. Or, some of these other ones. There's quite a few cedar trees, at least in this part of the field. And I like cedar trees. You could have like your own little Christmas tree farm here. If I was into that kind of thing. I usually do fake, artificial trees. This is the last tree that I water. This tree it's not quite to the edge of the field. You still got to take about 2 swipes with the lawnmower on this side of it. But this is one more tree that we decided to keep. This one's probably about 7 foot tall, maybe a little more. And again, I just take buckets of water and I'll put 3-4 buckets of water from the lake and just dump it on this tree. This one is kind of on the edge, where like water comes down and kind of erodes it away a little bit, because the grass doesn't like to grow here for whatever reason. It's really rocky. We might look into getting some, seeding this over a little bit over the years. But this is the last tree we've decided to keep so far, and it's another persimmon tree. So we'll continue watering this and hopefully it gets some good rain. And obviously this one's not competing for sunlight. It never was. So it gets good sunlight, and this one is doing pretty good. Got a few yellow leaves on it, but not many. Not like those trees, those little bitty trees over there. Those ones are looking a little sickly, but this one, not so much. It's doing pretty good. And of course the trees at the top of the hill, those ones are doing pretty good, and those ones are doing pretty good. So most of these persimmon trees are actually doing pretty good, and a lot of the, those 2 oak trees are doing good. And that one maple tree is doing pretty good. So here's to hoping for a shady future at the farm. Just got to keep watering, make sure it's got lots of sunlight, and keep the deer away from the trees. And if you find yourself in a similar predicament that I am in, where you're looking for more shade trees, just look at the trees that you have naturally growing on your property and see which ones are good trees. Water them if they're in a good spot. Definitely I'd say water them and make sure they're well taken care of. And 10, 12, 15 years down the line, you might have a fairly decent shade tree depending on how fast they grow. Like, I know maple trees grow well when they're regularly watered. Persimmon trees grow well. I don't know, well, those trees over there are persimmon trees, so they provide a pretty decent amount of shade. Oak trees, I can't remember how fast oak trees grow, but oak trees generally provide a good amount of shade. And yeah, so if you're looking for shade, just look at the trees that are naturally growing. And of course you can always spend money on some fairly decent sized trees and have them planted at your property, like we did at home. That's an option too. But if you're on a budget, like we did, we just picked a few trees that were decent trees and we kept them. So anyway, that's all for that video. Subscribe to my channel, and until next time, be safe.